Lesson 1-4, Subtract Integers. Solve and discuss it. A library database shows the total number of books checked out at any given time as a negative number. What are the possible numbers of books that were checked out and checked in on Monday? Explain. Pause the video while you attempt to solve and discuss this problem, and come back when you are ready to check your answer. In this first problem, you'll notice that by Monday morning, negative 37 represents 37 books that were checked out. By evening on the same day, 45 books have been checked out, as represented by the integer negative 45. Therefore, any combination of books checked in and checked out, which would result in 8 additional books being checked out for the day on Monday, would result in that evening total of negative 45 books. The essential question for this lesson asks, how is subtracting integers related to adding integers? Example 1. In this example, we're going to learn to subtract positive integers. A football team gains 3 yards on first down. On second down, they lose 8 yards. What is the total change in yards after the first 2 downs? We're going to look for relationships. You can use what you know about adding integers to subtract integers. In the first step, we use a number line to represent the team's total change in yards. A gain of 3 yards would be represented by movement in the positive direction. Remember that 0 represents the team's starting position. A loss of 8 yards would be represented with a negative number. In this case, a negative 8. So we're going to move from the positive 3 in the negative direction 8 yards to see where the team's final position is. Their final position on the number line is at negative 5, which represents the team's 5-yard loss after those 2 downs. Next, we can use subtraction to represent the team's change in yards. 3 take away 8 represents the 3-yard gain and the 8-yard loss. However, you'll notice that subtraction is the same as adding the opposite. In other words, to subtract 8, we can add its opposite, which is negative 8. I've highlighted that in the bubble to re-emphasize that subtraction is the same as adding the opposite. Now, the book also uses the idea of absolute value to show you that you're still finding the difference between your 2 integers, since technically one is positive and the other is a negative value, and that difference is 5, although it has to be a negative 5 because you are taking away more than what you have. Therefore, the total change in yards after the first 2 downs can be represented by the integer negative 5, which indicates it was a 5-yard loss. Now complete the try it. Remember that gaining yards is represented with a positive integer and losing yards is represented with a negative integer. In each case, you can represent this problem both as subtraction and as addition. Pause the video while you try this problem and come back and check your answer. Check your work and your answers for the try it. Now take a look at the convince me. Is the additive inverse of an integer always negative? Did you remember that additive inverse is another way of saying opposite? Remember that the additive inverse of a negative integer would be positive. The additive inverse of a positive integer would be negative. In example 2, we're going to learn how to subtract integers with different signs. Ian's football team lost 2 yards on a running play. Then they received a 5-yard penalty. What is the team's total change in yards? First, we write a subtraction expression to represent the change in yards. negative 2 minus 5 represents the 2 yards lost on the running play, and then taking away the 5 yards that the team was charged for the penalty. You could also write this as an addition expression, negative 2 plus negative 5. In each case, negative 2 and negative 5 represent integers that are a loss in yardage. Then you're going to add those two negative integers together. So negative 2 plus negative 5 equals negative 7. By the same token, negative 2 minus 5 also equals negative 7, because in both cases, beginning at 0 and moving to the left, negative 2 shows the loss of 2 yards. A 5-yard penalty, or adding on to that a negative 5 yards, continues to move in the left direction 5 units from the negative 2. So the team's total change in yards is represented by negative 7, so they lost 7 yards total. Remember that subtraction is the same as adding the opposite integer. Therefore, negative 2 minus 5 and negative 2 plus negative 5 are equivalent expressions. Example 3, subtract negative integers. In this example, you'll see that they have taken the subtraction expression and changed it over to an addition expression by adding the opposite of the second integer. Then the rules for addition apply, and you can find the difference between those integers by adding the opposite. Find negative 7, take away negative 8. Well, the first thing that we want to do is use the rule that subtraction is the same as adding the opposite. So we're going to rewrite that subtraction expression as negative 7 plus 8, because in this case, the opposite of negative 8 is a positive 8. So negative 7 take away negative 8 is equivalent to negative 7 plus its opposite, which is positive 8. Now that you have an addition expression, you can use the addition rule to add those two integers together. Negative 7 plus 8 is a positive 1. Now we're going to use the try it questions at the bottom for practice. Do you notice that all of those integers in those expressions are either a positive 4 or a negative 4, and a positive 6 or a negative 6? And the book did this intentionally because some of those answers will be the same while others are different. So the first thing that I want you to do is to pause this video and try rewriting each of those expressions as an addition problem. Come back in just a moment and we'll check those answers first before we try to solve the problems. Take a moment to check your answers for the addition expressions first. Once you have checked these answers, then go ahead and pause the video again and try to solve each of those problems A through F, and then come back and check your answers to the expressions. Now check your answers to each of those try it problems. If you need to, use the number line to help you find your answers. The key concept from this lesson is really important. When subtracting integers, such as any number A, take away a different number B, you can use the additive inverse to write subtraction as an equivalent addition expression. So A minus B is equivalent to A plus the opposite of B. Now you can put any digits you want in place of A and B, and that will always be the case. Once you have changed a subtraction problem into an addition problem, then you simply use your rules from lesson 1-3 where we learned how to add integers, and those rules now apply to the subtraction problems. So as you might guess, when I said lesson 1-3 was a gatekeeper lesson, this is why, okay? You've got to know those rules for adding integers because they now apply to subtracting integers once you have rewritten the subtraction problem as an addition problem. Next, we're going to try some work together. Now I'd like for you to try questions 2, 4, 5, and 6. Pause the video while you try to complete the questions, and then come back and restart the video to look for the problems, explanations, and answers. First, I want to give you a few moments to check your work and answers for questions 2, 4, and 5. You may pause the video while you're checking your answers, and then make sure you try question number 6, parts A, B, C, and D, and come back and check your answers to those as well. Now check your answers to question 6, parts A, B, C, and D. You may need to pause the video while you do that. Next, try questions 7, 8, 9, and 10. Again, pause the video while you attempt to solve each question, and then come back and check your answers to see how you're doing. Check out the answers to 7 and 8. How'd you do on those? When you're ready, try 9 and 10. Pause the video while you do that, please. All right, now check out the rest of your answers and see how you did. And be sure you're asking questions if you're still stuck or unsure what you're doing. When you're ready, go on to the next slide. Now take a look at questions 11 and 12. Again, try them on your own, and then come back to the video to check your answers. Okay, now take a look at your answers for 11 and 12. Check your work, pause the video if you need to, and ask questions if you need help. Next, try questions 13, 14, and 15. Again, pause the video, try the questions, come back and check your answers. Check your work and answers on questions 13, 14, and 15. Again, pause the video while you check. And last, try question 16, the assessment practice. Which number line model shows the subtraction 2 minus 4? The correct answer is B. Notice that the number line shows a positive 2 modeled first, and then take away 4, which ends up at a negative 2. You have now completed lesson 1-4. Feel free to go back and watch any parts of the video that you feel you need in order to get your notes, finish examples, or do additional practice work. Your 1-4 Math Excel has been placed in your Pearson Realize account. You're ready to go on to your Math Excel when you feel comfortable enough to try the problems on your own.